Imagine a plague, not of disease, but of men. For 7 years, the land of Israel was not a nation, it was a hunting ground. The Bible describes the enemy, the Midianites, with a single, terrifying image. They came as grasshoppers for multitude. They were a nomadic horde from the east, riding on camels, beasts that were the tanks of the ancient world. They didn't just conquer, they devoured. Every harvest season, when the wheat was golden and ready, they would descend from the desert like a dark cloud. They took the sheep, they took the oxen, they took the donkeys. They left nothing alive for sustenance. The Israelites, God's chosen people, were reduced to cavemen. They abandoned their cities. They dug dens in the mountains, hiding in the clefts of the rocks, terrified of the daylight. The proud nation of Joshua was gone. In its place was a starving, trembling population, whispering in the dark, wondering where their God had gone. It was an apocalypse. The land was stripped bare. Hope was extinct. Against this backdrop of absolute despair, God decided to act. But He did not send a legion of angels. He did not send a cosmic fire. He sent an angel to a winepress to talk to a man who was hiding in a hole in the ground. This is the story of the most illogical battle strategy in military history. This is the story of how 300 men, armed with clay jars and torches, broke the back of an empire. This is the story of Gideon.
Gideon was not a hero. Not yet. When we first meet him, he is the picture of fear. He is threshing wheat, usually an outdoor activity done on a hilltop to let the wind blow away the chaff. But Gideon is doing it at the bottom of a winepress, a cramped, sunken pit, desperate to hide his grain from the Midianite raiders. He is sweating, covered in dust, looking over his shoulder. He is the youngest son of the poorest family in the tribe of Manasseh. He is a nobody. And suddenly, the angel of the Lord sits under the oak tree in Ophrah and drops a line of dialogue that sounds almost sarcastic. "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Gideon looks around. He looks at his hiding spot. He looks at the starvation of his people, and he snaps back. "Please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? Where are all His wonderful deeds that our fathers were counted to us?" It is the question of every generation that faces darkness. If God is real, why are we suffering? But God ignores the complaint and gives a command. "Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?" Gideon argues. He pleads his weakness. He asks for signs. He is terrified. But eventually, the call of destiny is stronger than the fear of death. Gideon blows the trumpet. He sends messengers throughout the mountains, and the men answer. From Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, they come. 32,000 Israelite men gathered. They are tired of hiding. They are ready to fight. 32,000 Israelites against an alliance of Midianites, Amalekites, and the people of the east. The enemy army numbered 135,000. The odds were 4-1. In military terms, this is a suicide mission. But at least they had a fighting chance. If they used the terrain, if they used guerrilla tactics, maybe, just maybe, they could survive. But God looked at the army of 32,000 and shook His head. "The people with you God said, are too many.
This is where the logic of heaven clashes with the logic of earth. Any general in history wants more troops, more boots on the ground, more swords. But God was not interested in a military victory. He was interested in a theological statement. He knew the heart of Israel. He knew that if 32,000 men defeated the Midianites, they would build statues to themselves. They would say, "My own hand has saved me." So the great culling began. God gave the order, "Proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, 'Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and depart from Mount Gilead.'" Gideon must have stood on a rock, looking out at his army, hoping for courage. He made the announcement, and he watched in horror. They didn't just leave in ones or twos. They left in droves. They threw down their spears. They turned their backs. 22,000 men walked away, 2/3 of the army. Gideon was left with 10,000 men. The odds were now 13-1. "It is still too many," God said. You can imagine Gideon's panic. 10,000 is barely a division. But God ordered him to take the men down to the water to drink. It was a test, a strange physical test of awareness. The men were thirsty. They had marched for miles. When they reached the spring of Herod, most of them, 9,700 men, did what thirsty soldiers do. They dropped to their knees, burying their faces in the water, abandoning their guard, desperate for relief. They made themselves vulnerable. But 300 men did something different. They did not kneel. They scooped the water up in their hands, lapping it like a dog, their eyes scanning the horizon, their hands ready to grab a weapon. They remained alert. They were disciplined. "By the 300 men who lapped, I will save you," God declared. "Let all the other people go to their homes." 300 against 135,000. The odds were now 450-1. This was no longer an army. This was a special ops team. This was a suicide squad. Gideon sent the rest home. He stood on the ridge with his 300 men. They had no heavy armor. They had no chariots. They were standing against a swarm that covered the valley like locusts.
Night fell. The Valley of Jezreel was a sea of darkness, punctuated by the thousands of campfires of the Midianites. The sound of their camels, their conversations, the sharpening of their swords drifted up to the Israelite ridge. Gideon was afraid. The Bible is honest about this. Even after the signs, even after the fleece, the reality of the impending slaughter was terrifying. So God, in His mercy, offered one final boost of morale. "If you are afraid to go down," God said, "go down to the camp with Purah your servant." A stealth mission. Gideon and his servant crept down the rocky slopes, moving like shadows among the enemy's sentries. They reached the edge of the massive camp. They saw the camels without number as the sand that is on the seashore. And there, hiding in the dark, Gideon heard two enemy soldiers talking. "I had a dream," one soldier whispered. "Behold, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian and came to the tent and struck it so that it fell and turned it upside down so that the tent lay flat." Barley bread, the food of the poor, the food of the Israelites. The other soldier replied, his voice trembling, "This is no other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. God has given into his hand Midian and all the camp." Gideon froze. He realized something incredible. The enemy was afraid of him. The fear of God had already fallen upon the camp. The massive army was a house of cards, waiting for a breeze to knock it over. Gideon worshiped God right there in the dark.
He climbed back up the mountain. He looked at his 300 men. The fear was gone. "Arise," he commanded, "for the Lord has given the host of Midian into your hand."
The strategy Gideon laid out was madness. He divided the 300 men into 3 companies of 100. He did not hand them swords. He did not hand them shields. He gave every man a trumpet, a shofar made of a ram's horn. He gave every man an empty clay jar, and inside every jar a burning torch, weapons of sound and weapons of light. The plan relied on psychological warfare. In ancient battles, only the leaders or the signal corps carried trumpets. Usually one trumpet signified a battalion of 1,000 men. If the enemy heard 300 trumpets, their brains would calculate an army of 300,000 men surrounding them. It was the middle of the night. The middle watch had just begun, around midnight. The Midianite guards had just changed shifts. They were groggy. The camp was asleep. Gideon led his men down. They spread out, encircling the entire perimeter of the massive camp. They were silent ghosts in the darkness. The 300 Spartans of Israel, holding their breath, waiting for the signal. The air was cold. The clay jars hid the light of the torches. To the Midianites, the night was pitch black.
It happened in a single second. Gideon blew his trumpet, a long, piercing blast that shattered the silence. Instantly, 300 other trumpets joined him. The sound was deafening, echoing off the valley walls, surrounding the sleeping camp in a ring of sonic terror. Then, the crash. 300 men smashed their clay jars against the rocks. Smash! The sound of thousands of pieces of pottery breaking sounded like the clashing of armor, like the marching of a giant infantry. And then, the light. Suddenly, 300 torches flared up in the darkness, forming a perfect ring of fire around the valley. The men shouted the battle cry, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" Down in the valley, the Midianite camp woke up in hell. Imagine the confusion. They wake up to the sound of a massive army. They see fire everywhere. They hear screaming. They are disoriented. The camels panic, stampeding through the tents. The Bible says, "The Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army." In the chaos and the dark, the Midianites couldn't tell friend from foe. They saw shadows moving and struck out. They were killing each other. It was a frenzy of friendly fire. The discipline of the horde collapsed into absolute anarchy. The 300 Israelites didn't even have to draw a sword yet. They just stood there, blowing their trumpets and holding their torches, watching the enemy destroy itself. The invincible army of 135,000 disintegrated. Those who weren't killed by their own brothers fled into the night screaming. The battle wasn't over. The 300 men had broken the line, but now the rout began. Gideon wasn't done. He chased them. He sent messengers to the surrounding tribes, the men who had been sent home, the men of Ephraim, telling them to cut off the retreat. The River Jordan became a trap. Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted yet pursuing, crossed the Jordan. They were starving, they were sleep-deprived, but they were fueled by the adrenaline of the miraculous. They hunted down the kings of Midian, Zebah, and Zalmunna. This wasn't just a skirmish, it was an extermination of the threat. The text says that 120,000 swordsmen fell that day. The power of Midian was broken forever. They never raided Israel again. The story of Gideon is often taught in Sunday school with cute cartoons of jars and trumpets. But make no mistake, this was a gritty, dark, terrifying ordeal. It challenges our logic. We think we need more money, more resources, more strength to win our battles. We think that numbers equal security.
But the lesson of the 300 is that God works best when we are weakest. He stripped Gideon of everything, his army, his confidence, his weapons, until all that was left was a clay jar and a prayer. God reduced the army not to make the battle harder, but to make the glory clearer. In your life, you might feel outnumbered. You might feel like you are standing in a winepress, hiding from your problems, surrounded by a swarm of impossibilities. You might feel like you only have a broken jar in your hand. But remember the Valley of Jezreel. Remember the night the lights came on. Remember that one man, with God, is always the majority. The darkness is loud, but the light is stronger. Thank you for watching Biblical Sagas. If you want to see more battles where the impossible became reality, smash that subscribe button. Until next time, stand your ground.